welcome to The Age to Come. This is Biblical Doctrine for the Church in this age. I'm Dave Wilson, here as always with Pernell, Gibson, and Josh Howard. And this is episode 12 today, and we've got an interesting one for you here. We're calling it, or something to the effect of calling it, Employed by the Beast of Revelation. So with a spicy title like that, you know it's going to be a good episode.
Clickbaitiest title.
Yes,
I put it on there as a joke, but yeah.
Employed by the, I love the title. Okay. Employed by the Beast of Revelation. I'm, for one, I'm kind of curious as to where this conversation is going to go. I think it's going to be really interesting seeing what comes of this, because we haven't really talked about this at all ahead of time. So We'll see where it goes, but we're just going to kick off by talking about just like Christian producers or Christian filmmakers or something working for secular studios, and I'm sure that will eventually lead to a discussion of just in general working for a company or a government or an organization that's maybe openly hostile towards the Christian faith or something like that. So I think it's going to be a very good discussion.
Yep. Yeah, and just the fact that we phrased it as like, the Beast of Revelation, when we're talking about, the original conversation, I think, Pernell, you're the one that kind of launched it originally, talking about shows and movies and those type of things.
Yeah.
But I think it applies to all of us as well, because I think most Christians have gone through, Adolf Hitler might have not have come and asked you to join the Waffen SS or something, but you've probably had a job before or an opportunity maybe to do something, and you're thinking, man, I don't know if I want my face and name attached with that. I don't know if I should be doing that. I think
you work for a church, though, so I'm not actually sure if this discussion applies to you.
I'm just going to sit this one out. Yeah. Y'all have it.
We'll see you next week.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's good. So I guess that's kind of the first thing to look at. So, I mean, we use the phrase, the Beast of Revelation, I guess sort of tongue-in-cheek there.
Yeah.
When we use that, we're not referring to the future one-world government of Nikolai Carpathia as laid out in the best-selling series Left Behind, which is great books, but not great theology, I would say. But, we're not also going sort of hardcore Reformation era where we're saying the Beast of Revelation is the Roman Catholic Church, not quite taken in that direction. Really, when we talk about that, we're just talking about really any type of system that sets itself up as an alternative to or in opposition to really Christ and Christ's rule and reign and the church and that sort of thing.
Yep.
So,
like when I think about this, my mind first goes to, in terms of it being difficult for a Christian, I would think, compared to like a Christian working for, I don't know, just like a regular, like a grocery store who might support, anti-Christian things. A Christian doing that, working as like a manager or a cashier or something like that, I think would be easier to do for a corporation like that versus working for a movie company or a
like a studio,
yeah,
company,
or just a record label, that might, support artists who openly promote anti-Christian values and still be a Christian trying to sing Christian songs on this label when you have the other side coming against what it is that you should be standing against, basically.
Yeah.
Let me jump in there too, because I want to define it at the beginning, because you brought up movies, and I think it's where most minds would go. I think it's easy for us to think of, like right now I'm already starting to think of a couple TV shows and movies that we might mention, by name and things like that. Or Christians might be thinking like, oh, this has to do with like Disney, the corporation, and the corporation's taking certain steps that are away from, or really anti-Christian steps, as opposed to just away from Christ. But I would say also, just for Christians in general, all Christian vocation is something that's theological or doctrinal. So we're not just talking about, like, you pointed out, I work for the church. We're not just talking about pastors. That's not the only vocation that God gives to Christians. And when I'm pointing that out, I know you guys are on the same page with me, but so I'm singing to the choir a little bit, but part of the preaching to the choir, singing with the choir, preaching to the choir, something like that. Anyway, every position that a Christian has, if you drive trucks, that's a vocation God has given you, not only to provide for your family, but to give glory to God. Like, Christian vocation is not just for those in religious jobs or for those in movies or something like it. For every one of them. So whatever vocation God has given you, or whatever vocation you find yourself in, that's something that is theological and doctrinal. So I think we should all be thinking those things, whether you're working at something obvious that you may have Christian qualms about. If you're working at like a strip club and you're wondering to yourself, man, I'm a new convert, should I retain my employment at this strip club. That's an obvious one that you should probably be thinking through.
Right.
What if you work for Walmart, though, and they start selling things, or they start proclaiming things from their corporation? You're thinking, well, that's not really affecting me. I think that's what you're going toward.
In a sense,
yeah. That was the harder questions.
Yeah.
Right? Like some of them, like working in a strip club or something like that's pretty black and white.
Right.
But, that's easy. Yeah. It's easy. So we'll want to break into the harder ones.
When I first started thinking about this type of thing, I think what really got me thinking about it was realizing like the amount of gospel artists that were on, labels that, or like a branch off from like a main label that supported a lot of other mainstream artists that were very obviously against Christianity in terms of the things that they spoke about. And I began to wonder, like, how can you in good conscience, still be a part of this label and not, because a lot of those artists, they wouldn't even take hard stances on certain things despite being Christian. And so you have, these other, I guess you could say fellow employees in a sense, I don't think it works quite the same way, but still fellow employees like railing against certain values that you should hold as a Christian, and you don't say anything about it. Like, how do you do that?
Right.
Like, to me, that doesn't make any sense. I would think you would have to speak against it, but you can't, in a sense, because you're on the same label.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's just,
and you're bringing
where it gets really difficult.
You're bringing up artists.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this in regard to.
I was thinking like producers or something.
Okay,
like,
producers.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, no.
No, okay. Well, I was thinking books, obviously, because
Okay.
I find myself in books a lot. But I'm just looking behind you, Pernell, and half of those two bookshelves are from Eerdmans Publishing Company.
Okay.
Eerdmans Publishing Company made a whole lot of waves this month because they put out a pro LGBTQ plus post on their Twitter feed or Instagram or one of their social media accounts, and they were saying, here's some recommended Pride reading for the month, and then they kind of doubled down when they came back and said, just because we're a Christian publication company, that doesn't mean we can't present things of different viewpoints. Well, if you're a Christian author and you're trying to not just earn a buck, and you're not just trying to get something out there, but you're actually trying to do something worthwhile in God's kingdom, and you're publishing something of deep theological reflection, which again, half that bookshelf behind you is.
For sure.
And then they're going to publish that alongside other books that are pro things that are unbiblical.
Yeah.
Like how do you work that out? Is that a theological decision then? Like, ought I publish through this company alongside them?
I can't wrap my head around that.
Right.
Like, I mean, I for one, I didn't even know that. But that just seems so absurd to me. Ultimately, like, I guess I don't really
Which
know
part of it, to mix the two, or
trying to mix the two, essentially. Okay. Yeah, like you would think if you put yourself out there as a Christian publication company, then you should also have Christian values that would stop you from publishing things that are anti-Christian.
Right. One would hope. And there's still a lot of publishers. There's still a lot of publishers that do that. You were talking about like in movies and film and the arts. There's organizations and associations that do that sort of thing. But I would say that there's just as many who. I mean, at the end of the day, Walmart is there to sell things.
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Like Walmart did not form as a theological community. They didn't say we're gonna. No, we're selling things. We want to make a profit, and we want to turn a profit for our shareholders and for those who are working here, and et cetera, et cetera. So if Walmart starts selling something that is just blatantly anti-Christian, they're not doing it all the time to thumb their nose at Christians, or even any of the time to thumb their nose. They're just trying to sell things. If it's popular and it's going to sell and it's going to make the bottom line go up, that's what they're going to do. The hard part for the Christian then is, can I be a part of that though?
Right.
I expect companies to do what's in their best bottom line interests. I expect most entertainment to do that. It doesn't personally offend me when a movie studio just falls head over heels for whatever wind and wave there is in society.
Right.
It doesn't hurt my feelings because I understand they're not in this to follow God. Like, that's not who they're a company who's trying to sell a product.
Right.
They're going to do whatever advances that. But for the Christian who's involved in it, I think that's where the decisions come down.
Right.
When we first started talking about this, I remember they used to have those old school Baptist covenants on the wall. I'm sure it wasn't just in Baptist churches, but there used to be like this one, and they must have sold it at the same place everybody shopped, because everybody had. You seen those old ones? They're like
I think I know what
8
you're talking
feet
about.
tall on the wall, and like old script, and I think it was even an old English kind of writing, but it was essentially like, we shall not do this and we shall do this. And I remember there was a part in there about backbiting, which always cracked me up because it's just kind of an ancient term. So it was always interesting to me. I always thought of people biting each other's backs and like, no, we don't do that here.
My kids do that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Not in this church, son. But no, but like one of the things on there was though they said because they were against any sort of alcohol. And they said, not only can you not drink alcohol, which that would be one thing to discuss as a church, they said you cannot be, it was something like you can't be employed by or work at any place that profits from it. So in essence, if you're working at Walmart and Walmart decided it was in their best bottom line to sell beer, you as a Christian, if you were at that church, by the covenant, you would have to resign your job at Walmart because you're working for a company. And that's where I think for the Christian, you know, obviously that's maybe not an extreme example, but that's a really clear example because they had a church covenant. But for a lot more Christians, I think it's a lot more hazy when they're sitting there and they're looking around and they're saying, okay, these things conflict with what I know to be true, but it's a job. So do I just hunker down and get through it? Do I fly under the radar? How do you do that as a Christian?
Yeah.
And if it's not something you've dealt with now, I dare say, I think most Christians will wrestle with that much more than we would think they would.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it would depend on the job itself. Like if you're, well, then again, though, because I think you would need to draw the line somewhere. But like if you are just, I don't know, working like in customer service, like for example, where someone, you know, you're just assisting people with like getting the things that they need. I guess this is very vague, but it just depends on what the job is. But if it's something that's relatively neutral, it seems like it would be more of a conscience issue, you know, for the Christian. But at the same time, if it's an organization that is, oh goodness gracious, if it's an organization that is, well, let's just say we're going to Planned Parenthood, for example. I don't think that a Christian should be working at Planned Parenthood.
Okay.
And I mean, even if you're not doing, like, even if you're just like the receptionist and you're not necessarily administering, you know, any medical procedures or whatever, just working for the organization because of what it represents as a Christian, you just shouldn't do it. That's what
Let me push back on two things, and then I want y'all to work with me on this because I don't have an answer. So you guys are going to find the answer. No, you made me think though, because number one, when you said it was an issue of conscience, what you mean is it's not something that is clearly a command or a prohibition or a command in Scripture. God doesn't say thou shalt or thou shalt not clearly, but that you're not saying that it's not important, and that you shouldn't do it from biblical convictions. Most Christians, and I say that because I feel like most Christians, when they hear, oh, it's an issue of conscience, that just means, oh, good, I don't have to worry about this. And they wad it up and throw it in the trash. It's like, thank goodness it's just a matter of conscience. Like, I'm good. That's not what we mean. That means probably more so you need to be on your face and searching Scripture because it is a matter of conscience. But then secondly, when you were talking about that, so I always go to the extreme example, and a lot of people push back on going to an extreme example because they say it's, you know, egging the pudding or throwing, you know, mud in the water and all that. I like egging the pudding. That's just we like the baking shows and the British baking shows. But anyway, so you if you go to like Nazi Germany, okay, so you've got one of the concentration camps that is systematically murdering millions of people, and mostly Jews, but a lot more people as well that were thrown in the mix. And victimized by that system. If you were so much as sweeping the floor there while people were carrying out executions, you would have been drugged to Nuremberg and convicted. It doesn't matter that you weren't the one actually dragging them to the gas chamber. It doesn't matter that you weren't the one actually breaking people's bones. You were part of the system. You were part of the machine. We look at extreme examples like that, and of course, if you read the Nuremberg trials, most of the excuses that were given was, all I did was drive the train. All I did was walk them down here. Even the guys that literally pushed the button, I didn't know what it actually was doing. All I did was follow orders and push the button. And Nuremberg, and I think this would be a biblical principle that they followed, was that's not an excuse. That doesn't get you out of it. You're part of the machine. You're doing the work. Backing up from that kind of extreme clear example, though, what if you're part of a cleaning company that cleans the building of Planned Parenthood? You're a convicted Christian. You believe that the Bible says that it is murder to kill an unborn child. Are you participating in that system by cleaning that building? I think it'd be clearer if we said, are you the one back there sharpening the tools? You know what, and I'm not trying to be crass, but like, you know what I mean? Like, that seems, okay, that's clear. You as a Christian, you can't do that. Let me encourage you not to do that. But how far does that stretch, I think, is where it hits for the Christian a lot of times.
For sure.
Yeah.
Just thinking about that, though, like just the example that you gave of the one cleaning the building, I don't think that one is as heinous as the one, you know, because you're working for a separate company that cleans all sorts of different places, right? I would imagine, like, if it was me as the Christian, I'd be like, oh, we got to go into Planned Parenthood today. But I'm not I'm not participating in anything. I'm not doing anything to further the company unless you count cleaning their bathrooms or whatever as furthering the company. But I don't really put that in the same category as even being, I don't even know how it works, but being a greeter, like, oh, welcome to to me, that's terrible. Yeah. Oh, welcome to Planned Parenthood today. What time is your abortion? Just come over. You know, I don't know.
Really hope.
Oh, goodness. Are we getting to that point?
Yeah. We're getting pulled off YouTube. That's all I can think right now.
But you see what I'm saying? Like, even just like something as simple as like, oh, greeting people as they come in the door, welcome, come, kill your child. Like, that's terrible. But yet they're still not the one doing the more intense things.
Right.
But that's just as heinous in a sense, if you're a Christian.
Yeah.
And being a part of that versus I'm going to go in and clean this building after hours or during or sometimes probably during. But
right.
I put those in different categories, if any of that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think so. Yeah, and it's just interesting because so I'm an electrician by trade, and it's not like it's an official motto or anything, but kind of the general attitude for us is we don't care what you want to build, we just want to build it. So it's like we don't care if you're building a giant marijuana grow facility or a strip club or a casino or a school or a library. We just want to be the ones that get to work and get out there and do that. I did actually, one of the last jobs I worked, I don't work out in the field anymore, but one of the last jobs I had, I worked at a big pot farm that they're making in Marshall.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I mean, to some degree,
and we should point out,
with.
we're in a state where that's a legal industry.
This is legal, yes.
Dave was not under the radar working for cash.
His secret pot farm.
Yeah, right, exactly. But, that was something that I guess I never really thought that seriously about. But, it was something that did kind of cross my mind. It's just like, okay, am I endorsing this? But I think it's kind of difficult with something like that because, like, with something like marijuana, like, there are, I would say, legitimate righteous uses of it. If someone's like a, sick cancer patient or something like that, so it's not like there's something inherently sinful about, the plant or the growing of the plant. Right. But then obviously, someone could kind of come from the other direction and say, oh, well, it's you're feeding people's addictions or supporting an industry that, feeds addictions or abuse or, things like that. So I think there is an argument to have there. But again, like you said earlier, Pernell, that's something that, is a Christian conscience issue. For sure.
When you were talking about the promoting things, and being a part of that, my mind went to, this might be stretching it just a little bit, but my mind went to every year, at Christmas time, I'm frantically searching by early October for Christmas songs that I can blast for the next 3 months solid, maybe 4 months if I go into January with them. But, anyway, when you're looking up Christmas songs, some of the most beautiful Christmas songs are sung by Mormon choirs, and it would always bother me a little bit hearing those songs because Mormonism does not teach a biblically faithful gospel. I would not consider them Orthodox Christian in the small O sense of Orthodox Christianity, and so you hear people that have a wrong belief and are leading others astray, even while claiming the name of Christ, they're leading others astray. And yet their choirs are beautiful, and you'd hear those songs, and some of them were very stirring, but I never was comfortable listening to them because I felt like, not that I was participating in it, but just the fact that kind of the rotten fruit type analogy, like I know this is coming from somewhere bad, and even just that knowing that kind of makes it feel a little bit odd. When we first started this conversation, Pernell, you were talking about being on a movie, for example, or TV shows, whether being on them or whether watching them. Like, do we watch shows that may distort the gospel or may present the gospel in an unclear fashion? Is that being part of that propagated in this world? Did you want to launch into that a little bit?
Yeah, that was something I was thinking about, especially because you mentioned LDS. Like, I hesitate saying this. Well, no. I enjoyed very much the first season of The Chosen.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought the story was put together really well.
Which The Chosen, correct me if I'm wrong because I didn't watch it, but it tells the story of the Gospels, essentially, of Jesus Christ.
Right.
But they make pretty clear that they're taking some liberalities, right?
Yeah.
Kind of filling in some some gaps that aren't there. Or
Yeah,
something
definitely,
like that? Okay.
definitely. And
It's like Christian fan fiction.
yeah, right.
Oh my word!
In a sense.
It's kind of what it is.
That's not a ringing endorsement. Go ahead, though. Go ahead.
Well, just from a storytelling perspective, I mean, I like, anime, comic books. I like stuff like that. And the story was told in a way that was kind of like an epic, kind of like a Lord of the Rings style, especially with the way like the first season went and everything. I was troubled to learn that in the second season, I've only watched the first episode of the second season. I was troubled to learn that they were, I guess, funded to some extent by the LDS Church. Mm-hmm. And then I'm just going to read the quote from the producer of the show. So he was on. I think it was like a Mormon who was interviewing him about the season 2 of The Chosen and whatnot, and the interviewer was asking him about some of the pushback from other Christians about them being disappointed that he would film most or all of the second season on it was a LDS campus. It was something that was exclusively for the LDS Church and whatnot. And then it was I think VidAngel was the distributor, which I think is owned by Mormons. Now, since I've read some things that's come out in the past few months where they was like, no, it's not owned by Mormons. It's just some Mormons that work there, and I'm not really sure if what the truth is there. But one of the things that he said, he was like, he said, this is Dallas Jenkins. He said, our disagreements are about what Jesus did after he came. And then he said, we Christians and Mormons worship the same Jesus.
Right.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one with Mormons in particular.
Yeah.
Because if you ask a Mormon, they affirm the Bible. They affirm, all 66 books. They just also have an additional testament, which contradicts a number of Orthodox teachings.
Essentially, I mean, to say something like that, I don't know. I guess I don't understand unless he doesn't. No. I feel like I'm giving him too much slack here. Like, I don't see how he could not know that these are two very different Jesuses.
Okay.
Because they really just believe that Jesus is just another God. They, believe that,
and he's
we can become gods.
being.
He's a created being also. Yeah. Yep. So I don't know if these are things that you just tell yourself to, try and just.
Well, and I'll tell you why
I'll
tell you why I think this conversation is a lot more. I would think this would be more intense what you're bringing up now, because if you've got Walmart, no one should expect Walmart to be leading them theologically or showing them who God is, right?
Sure.
If that's you, then you've missed it. But so we look to Walmart for like really cheap stuff, right? When necessities. So when Walmart then starts saying we're going to be pro this and pro that, which are unbiblical stances to take, we may find it a little easier to say, okay, well, I'm not supporting those stances, but I'm still going to shop here because I'm just coming here for food or toys for my kids. I'm not coming here for a view of God. But what you're talking about is when somebody's saying, whether they're saying this is completely biblically accurate or this is based on the story of Christ or whatever, but hey, this is Jesus,
right? And
they're showing you who the Son of God is,
right?
And the roots from which that fruit is coming are rotten,
right?
That's a whole different conversation, I think, and that's why I think that Christians always, if you think seriously about matters of God, which every Christian should, you're always going to be labeled as like, he's no fun, he's just trying to nitpick everything, too theologizing and everything. But especially when you're presenting a picture of who God is, we have to be really careful with what we're recommending. Sure. And that's why, to me, it would be far easier for me to watch a pagan show with my kids. Yeah. And when I say pagan, I'm not being vitriolic. I mean just a show that has no basis. They don't claim to be Christian at all. They're just like, hey, here's a show about some, I don't know, something just random that is just, occurring on the screen, versus here's a depiction of Jesus, but it's off just a tad. Mm-hmm. That to me is way worse than the former.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like with something like The Chosen, I've seen a handful of the episodes of it, but with something like that, so if you're the creator and you're a Christian, and this is your show that you're doing, creator of the show, yes. Okay. The creator of the show, and you pitch this idea, hey, I've got this show, we're going to teach about Jesus, and okay, so the studio that agrees, hey, we'll produce this is, in this case, Mormon or largely Mormon. Right. But if they're still saying, okay, well, you can do what you want to, we're just going to fund it. I think there's a difference between that and them, and I have no idea where were the stipulations, if there were any or anything like that. But I think that's categorically different if they're saying, okay, well, we're going to do this for you. Or in the same way, like if you're Josh and you're writing a book and, the publisher is questionable or something like that, but at least they're agreeing to promote your content.
Yeah.
That's, I think, categorically different than if they're saying, okay, well, yes, we'll do that, but we're going to change some of these things here to make sure that it fits our, agenda or views or something like that.
And that was my concern with the second season. And I want to be careful because I don't know for certain if that happened or not. And I've only ever seen the first episode of the second season. One of the things that I did hear, though, and I still don't fully understand the context, but I can't really understand why you would leave this out, is for whatever reason when I can't remember what episode it was. I think it was like episode 5 or 6 or something. When John the Baptist appeared, in the story, for whatever reason, he didn't baptize Jesus. He didn't show any of that. And I don't know why. I don't know if it has something to do with, because like the first season was completely, if I'm not mistaken, like crowdfunded. Like it was like people donating and everything. Yeah. Whereas the second season, most or all of the funding, I believe, came from VidAngel. And so when I hear about stuff like that, and just looking at what we see happen with like other shows and just other, like when people, say, oh yeah, we'll give money to do this, they usually want something.
Right.
They want something represented in some way, and that could be somewhat cynical to think that. But I apply that same type of thinking with this particular situation.
And I'm gonna put my tinfoil hat on for a minute.
Tinfoil hat.
With two things. Well, same issue, but two regards to it. So, I with my tinfoil hat firmly on my head think that every time you have somebody who's producing 99.9999% of the time. Very, very seldom is there an exception to it, I think, where you have somebody putting something out there and they're not influenced by the paycheck.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like I think there are those times where, like you brought up, like maybe there's a Mormon funding or a Mormon group funding a certain show, but they put no stipulations on it and the show just cruises on. That may happen. I think far more than that, though, is they're going to self-edit, because I joked earlier on here about, we're going to get yanked from certain hosting platforms because of words we're using in this episode. You cannot tell me that shows on those platforms right now are not self-editing and self-censoring so they can avoid the algorithms. Yeah. The same thing has happened. It happens in publishing. It happens in television. You can't tell me that if you have a show that is funded by who's the guy that used to he owned like everything in television for a little while. Oh, good grief. I can't think of it right now, but let's just say Bob has Bob's publishing company, okay? And I write my book, and one of the chapters is Bob is a total jerk, and I just go off on Bob for a whole chapter. I know that's not going to get published.
Right.
So you can call it whatever you want to, but people are mindful of the fact that I'm going to trim these things in such ways that they'll skate through and be broad enough. And I think that's why a lot of things within Christianity are broad to the point of not offending not only various brands of Christians, but the world in general.
For sure.
We self-edit and self-polish to the point where there's very little left.
One of the things that caused me to think about things, and I think in this way, like years ago, I went to it was a Christian concert, but it was like out in this park. We were in, North Carolina. And it was at the time they were a Christian Group One Crew. I don't know if they even still are a Christian group or if they still exist, but I remember, listening to their songs. This was my first time hearing them. I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. It's upbeat and stuff like that. And this was probably like in 2010. But I remember the lead singer got on stage and then he started explaining to the crowd that they weren't going to mention Jesus in their songs that much moving forward. And I thought that was odd. And I was like,
you found it odd for a Christian group not to want to mention Christ.
I found it very odd.
That's odd.
Yeah, I was like, that's really odd. And, and at the time, though, like, I'm very, like I didn't listen to a lot of Christian music, and I still don't listen to, like, a ton. But I just didn't listen to, I listened to it even less back then. And usually I would just listen to, instrumental,
After
type
DC
stuff.
Talk, it all went downhill.
Right. So. But I remember I looked them up after that. I was like, oh, let's find some more of their stuff. And then I saw that they had just moved from whatever independent Christian label they were to Warner Music. And I found it hard to believe that that wasn't why they decided, we're just one. Yeah. I feel like it probably came from the top down.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really tough too to, try to, judge hearts or whatever on scenarios like that. But we do see it all the time. Like I listen to a lot of like Christian hip hop and stuff like that. And, there was a big shift a few years ago with a lot of the artists that are really popular today where, prior to, 2012, 2014, somewhere in there was a lot of guys that were really very much focused on, teaching Christianity, really proclaiming the gospel through their music. And then you see a lot of those guys really shift, and their last couple albums have been, still wholesome, whatever, but it's like their emphasis really changed. Now, if you listen to it, it sounds, really just like, anything that you would hear on the radio, more or less. And, they're still professing Christians, and we'll still, talk about Jesus on social media or something. But by and large, it's like there's a big shift in their focus. So it's almost like, okay, what is your motivation? Like, are you just trying to sell more albums? Or, you'll sometimes hear them push back and say, well, we're just trying to, get more people to listen to us, to hear the message or something, but it's almost, I don't know. I guess that's a whole other discussion there, but it's almost like, if you back off on that, you'll get a little bit wider in terms of who you get. And I think with a lot of churches, we see that too. If we were to stop preaching, through the Bible the way we do, we could get a lot more people through the door. If we would just do some sermon series on popular things and how to be a better person and things like that, we could probably get a lot more people here on a Sunday morning.
10 steps to being a better parent.
Exactly. We could do that, and we would probably see a lot of success there, measured in some direction. We would probably see a lot of people that might be off-put by some of the things they hear on a Sunday morning now that might give us another shot. Or again, I know we're drifting in terms of our topic, but
not that far. Really.
I was gonna say because it seems like there's always a line that gets crossed. Like I'm thinking about one former Christian rapper. He got increasingly more secular, and then he started affirming people who one person I'm thinking about in his song, he says, Jesus can't save you. Life starts when the church ends, and so he's like bumping elbows with this guy. And it's like, oh, yeah, the greatest rapper and all this other stuff and like affirming him. You cross the line at that point. Yeah. If you're supposed to be a Christian rapper, you know?
There's a trend. No, Dave, you're right. We are getting way off topic. I'm going to go there anyway, though. I already started. There's a trend. I mentioned first of all, it's not being cynical just to observe trends, right? And that's all I'm doing is observing trends. That it seems that many especially within Christian, not just Christian art, like I'm thinking musicians and singers and things like that, but also Christian authors, especially Christian authors that write more popular appeal type books. And I'm not thinking of like academic writing. I'm thinking of like popular level works. It seems that the higher they rise, the less they start to say consistently. To the point where you see, number one, you see Christian music artists starting to cooperate with those that they used to speak against, and now all of a sudden they're friends with them. Yep. You start to see Christian authors who will re-release their books and have edited out large sections of their books that would have been offensive to a larger audience. Right. That's not me just saying that you can't be successful in the world's terms and still remain true to your Christian values. Sure. But I think Scripture leads us to think that that's going to be harder. Right. It is harder for you to be all of a sudden selling millions of whatever you're selling, songs, books, whatever, and then you not to be tempted then to so soften that down to where it is appealing to a mass audience. Sure. When Christ says that you should expect tribulation and trials in this world if you're following him, the world's going to hate you because it hated me, Christ said. Right. It's the same thing we see in Christian churches a lot of times. Christian churches have for decades now, this is way off topic, so reel it in after I say this, but Christian churches for decades have sacrificed the distinctives of the gospel in favor of some sort of mass appeal of church growth. We want to grow our churches, and in order to do so, we say very little past the fact that there's somebody named Jesus Christ who we're following. Right. Now, the details about him and what he's done and why he did it, now those we need to be really careful with because that's offensive. But there's a Jesus, and that's enough for us. Right. And then we tell you how to be a good parent, and we grow our church.
So all of this that we're talking about, essentially, I mean, with a Christian in the music industry, a Christian in the movie industry, Christian authors, pastors. What is a pastor, by the way?
Stop it.
Okay.
Don't even go there.
That'll be next episode.
Yeah.
But no, all of this,
it's a person who identifies as a pastor.
Oh, my word.
Throw that out there right now. Sorry. Go.
Send your emails to the age to come webcast@gmail.com.
But no, like all of this, honestly, I mean, it comes down to a heart issue also. So like to answer the question, like, can a Christian be employed by the beast? Sure. But there has to be.
Okay.
There has to be.
Started.
Yeah, we can just end the episode right there. Yeah.
But there has to be a line. You have to have some hard lines.
Yes.
You know, and some of those hard lines are indeed hard, and I don't think they can be erased. And some of them, I think, will vary. Right. If that makes sense.
And I think looking toward encouragement for the Christian, you mentioned conscience early on, and we said that that's something you need to pray about. That would be, if kind of looking toward what we're going to conclude with, I would say that would be my takeaway from this, is that you have to really commit these things to prayer, and not just your own feelings, but biblical study to determine where those lines are going to be for you. Now, we said that because especially if the world and the corporations of this world, which the corporations, I think in large part, are just going to reflect the heart of the world around us. Right. So if the world is becoming dark and is continuing to reject the Savior, and the corporations and businesses and entities that we work for are following that course of this world, you're probably going to have to come to that time at some point where, let's say you have the company there, and we say, okay, if you come in as a third-party contractor and you're cleaning this company, you're probably okay. But the company, everything the company is saying is, let's just say, anti-God. Very clearly, we're celebrating, we're pro this, and all these things are anti-biblical. Can you work as a representative of that company, going around passing out the business cards of this company, touting its benefits, selling people on the company? Well, we'd probably say, well, no. Well, let's take another step down. Can you be a manager at that company? Can you be just a worker at that company? Can you be a floor sweeper at that company? The Christianity is not legalistic to the point of where I think we can draw a hard, fast line and say this applies in every situation. But that doesn't mean there's not a line for you as a Christian, in every situation. Exactly. That will be based on your biblical study and God working through the Holy Spirit in your heart.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's something that's always going to be something you're going to work through. That's something that I guess to put some skin on it, that's something that I've been working through, really for especially the last year or so, because I represent a company, or an organization really, not really a company, but as an organization, we're very politically involved, and we endorse a lot of political candidates, and there's somewhat of an expectation for me to be politically involved. So that's something that I'm continually working through is, okay, what degree of endorsements can I do for some of these some of these people that I'm expected to endorse, and is there a difference, between just passing out information saying, hey, these are the candidates that from the top down we're supporting, versus me like trying to argue with someone to support a candidate that I just can't in good conscience support. For sure. That's not to say that there's any clear, easy answers, but that's just something that even for me, like I'm continually working through that.
Definitely.
And that's something that, I think Christians in general are going to have to work through. And it's also something that isn't all that new, even looking at, before the Christian church was legalized in the Roman Empire, a lot of the common jobs were just general construction. Well, what was being built in the first few centuries AD? Mostly pagan temples, pagan centers of worship, things like that. And there were a number of Christians who simply said, no, I can't work on that. Like, I'd love to go and be a mason and build your building, but I can't build this temple to, Zeus or Artemis or whoever, so that's not a new thing. Like, there were Christians who skipped meals because they refused to work there. So I think we do need to acknowledge that, that there very well might be hardships, and especially the way that, many aspects of our culture has been going in recent decades. It's very reasonable to believe that, that we are going to have to go without to a certain extent. For sure. When and if things continue to get darker.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because for number one, like you said, skin in the game. That's it. It's really easy for me to say things as a pastor, knowing that I'm employed by a church. But I understand that for our people and for those who might be listening to this webcast, that's real life. You're feeding your children. You have responsibilities. Like, this is not just an easy or quick decision. But then, like you pointed out, Dave, that doesn't mean that the job automatically trumps your Christian convictions. Right. It can't. Right. So if you feel that God is honored and Scripture is abided by with you being employed there, then I say glorify God in that job. But what you can't say is, well, I've got to make a living, as if God can't really say anything to my life when it comes to vocation, where I spend a third of my waking hours or half of my waking hours. God doesn't have anything to say about that because, hey, I got to make a paycheck. That's us then taking away from God. God says he's the one that feeds the sparrows and the lilies, and that he clothes his children. So we should trust God, but at the same time, like you said, I'm not pretending this is an easy discussion for people. That's where it hits home, is with the putting food on the table.
Yep.
So this might be a good segue, because I kind of have a question, but I want to read something first. So this is 2 Corinthians 6, 14 through 16. It says, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers, for what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial, or what portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? What agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God. As God said, I will make my dwelling among them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people." So in thinking about this, like, is there anything that we as Christians could take from this and apply it to our jobs, where we spend most of the day? And it depends on, obviously, where we work, but I think that there is, because we're still dealing with people, and sometimes we might be asked to do things for the sake of the job that goes against what we believe. So how do we interact with this scripture just in working some jobs?
I think a lot of it goes, to, again, what we've been talking about in terms of conscience. Like, obviously, if you're being asked to do something specifically that is immoral, you need to not do that, even if it is just a conscience issue and not a scripture issue. Right. I think it's Paul says elsewhere that, doing something that you are convicted against is sinful, even if it's not, they're not saying, oh, go commit adultery or something that's explicitly condemned. Right. So Christians are bound by their conscience. And then I would say, to kind of back up a little bit, maybe take more of a bird's eye look at that topic, is just, I guess, really the biblical idea of being in the world but not of it. Right. Which is, again, a difficult thing to wrestle with, but my mind goes to like Joseph in Egypt. Here he is, second in command of this largest pagan entity in the world, yet he was, somehow he wasn't compromising himself, even though he did hold this authority in this, wicked environment that he was in. So
Which, for those watching, if you've never watched Bodie Baucham's sermon on Joseph.
Oh, yes, that's a good one.
So solid.
That was really good.
So solid. Not the new one that he preached. I prefer the old one that was what was that, 15 years ago or something like that. But in any case, it's an interesting one to bring up, Pernell, because usually when we think about being unequally yoked, we think of marriage. And I think it's correct. But it should make you consider, if I'm forming a law company, I'm not a lawyer. If I'm forming a law firm, and my partner is going to be someone who is avowedly atheist, are we going to run into problems? You better believe we're going to run into problems. Can we support that guy? Can we defend this man in court? I used to know a good amount of attorneys, both on the prosecution and defense sides of it, and a lot of defense attorneys would wrestle with, how do I defend somebody as a Christian who I know they're guilty, and yet I'm called to defend them as the public defender or private defender or what that might be. I think Christians should think in those terms, maybe more so now than we have been accustomed to in the past. I feel that for most Christians, they've bifurcated their lives into the point where here's God and here's my job. Right. More so than we do with any other thing. We pretend like our job is just somehow this secular sphere that doesn't get touched by things. I think you should be buying from Christian vendors. I think you should be partnering with Christian companies. I think you should be trying as best as you can to support godly people in the economy, as opposed to unequally yoking yourself potentially with someone whose values clash with yours.
For sure. Definitely. No, that's good. That's great.
No,
that's good.
Anything else to suss out on this one?
No, I think that's I think that pretty much does it.
If we have not, I know we wove a little bit between kind of Christian artistry, and then we also talked about some of the other ways that this impacts people. But if we can expand on that, please send us an email, the age to come webcast at gmail.com. Or drop us a line if you have any personal contact with us, and we would love to follow up on that, I think. As always. But I think that might do it for today.
Absolutely, yeah. And any other questions or topics or anything like that, feel free to send our way. We are always looking for more episodes to offend people with. So
yeah, be sure to mash that like button. No, I'm not gonna do it.
Please do that though.
Subscribe if you'd like to.
Yeah. We gotta get our subscriptions up so we can change our URL.
That's right.
So that's
we need the URL change.
It's a noble
honestly.
cause to be part of.
It is.
Please subscribe.
It is.
Please subscribe. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we will see y'all in a couple weeks. Grace and peace.